The tempo is high in South Africa as the country gears up for its presidential poll. Now, the leader of South Africa's biggest opposition party urged voters to back his party in Wednesday's poll to avoid a doomsday. I repeat, doomsday scenario of the ruling African National Congress, ANC, forming a coalition with radical parties. Now, Democratic Alliance leader John Steenhuisen said that the election would go down in history as the most consequential day for South Africa since the dawn of democracy in the country. Now, joining me on the program at this time is Matthew Pax, COSATU Acting National Spokesperson and Parliamentary Coordinator, South Africa. Thank you for joining me, Matthew.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
All right, so Matthew, let me just start with your immediate reaction to this very disturbing description. The DA used the word doomsday. I mean, that is pretty deep. I'd like to know what you think about that.
No, look, I think to be fair to the DA, they have the right to use any adjectives they want to use, whether or not they're based in reality, whether or not they make sense. It's part of the election campaign. People are excited. Politicians will use all sorts of exaggerations, etc. So yeah, I don't think we needed to worry too much about it. The DA actually is the one who should be worried because they have been stuck at about 20% of the polls for the past, 10 years plus. So they're struggling to actually grow. They kind of reach a bit of a cul-de-sac in terms of their support, which is largely minority-based, largely confined to the Western Cape province, which is where Cape Town is located. So I think the DA actually should be a bit more worried why the majority of voters actually have never had confidence in the DA. I think from ourselves as COSATU, the Congress of South African Trade Unions, our focus is not on the DA or any other small opposition party. Our focus is on ensuring that the African National Congress, the ruling party, our alliance partner, does win the elections, is returned to office for a seventh time with a majority. And the opinion polls show us being very close to achieving that. So across most provinces, I think for us, we're just focusing on that. And of course, once the elections are done, to focus on fixing the state, dealing with corruption, growing the economy, reducing unemployment.
You talked about COSATU being some sort of in alliance with the ANC, but the DA actually used the word doomsday, alleging that the ANC is forming coalition with radical parties. I mean, that's pretty knife deep. So I would like to, of course, know your reaction on that, categorization. What parties do you think were being referred to as radical parties?
No, look, we have about, South Africa is a vibrant, robust, multi-party democracy. We have in the current parliament about 12 or 13 political parties in the parliament. Of course, the ANC is the only party which ever gets confidence of society. Most of the parties are quite small, 1%, etc. The ANC is the only party which ever has enjoyed the support of 60%, 55% of society. And look, some of the smaller parties are quite bizarre. Some of them are quite worrying and scary. Some are quite corrupt and have a very strange relationship with the rule of law. So the DA is right to be concerned, for example, about some of the other opposition parties, whether it's the EFF, which is a populist party based upon a single individual. We will share their concerns about that. They're right to raise concerns about some other parties, one founded by the former President Jacob Zuma, which we think is nothing more than a political scam to keep him out of jail. But I think for us, we're not concerned about those smaller parties. Our mandate is to support the ANC, to campaign for the ANC. And the reason why the ANC has always done well is because it's the only party which ever sold its policies to society. It's not focused on criticizing other smaller parties. It's actually saying, this is what we're offering to voters to improve their lives, to fix the state, to grow the economy. And this is also why we are supporting them, because of their progressive policies, which have done a lot of good things since we became a democratic state in 1994.
Now, the elections is just pretty much, around the corner. We saw just over the weekend the ANC itself round up its campaign, largely attended and all of that. But there are also concerns that this particular election in 30 years might be a watershed in South Africa, given the fact that there has been a lot of controversy surrounding the ANC, including the president, talking about Cyril Ramaphosa. Do you see that happening in this election. Do you think this election will go down as the usual election South Africa has had in the past 30 years, or do you see a tight race?
No, it is a tight race. All the opinion polls indicate it's a tight race, with the ANC at around 50%, or very close to it. The D at around 20%, and the other parties around 10% and less. It is going to be a tight race in terms of not can the other parties beat the ANC, they can't. The support is negligible compared to the ANC. But does the ANC get an outright majority? That's the question. All the opinion polls show the ANC getting a majority in the majority of provinces. And even the two provinces where it might not get a majority, it will definitely be the biggest party. And no matter what happens, the ANC will be leading government. That one's a guarantee. If the ANC gets 45%, it will just simply form a coalition with a few other parties. And that'll be, fine. That's part of the course. Look, to be fair to the ANC, it's inevitable. If you've been running government for 3 decades, and you've made some mistakes, which is also inevitable. Of course, some parts were deeply regrettable. So it's inevitable you will lose some support. So I don't think that should be a shock or surprise. In very few other countries do you have a political party winning democratic election after democratic election and retaining support. It's a difficult thing. But I think also, to be fair to the ANC as well, that the decade when Jacob Zuma was president was a very costly decade. The amount of mistakes his administration made, the amount of corruption that was orchestrated during his administration from the very top, that has caused huge damage. And I look, President Cyril Ramaphosa has inherited the most difficult challenge of any president since 1994. He's inherited a state which is under severe strain, an economy which is struggling to grow, high levels of unemployment. He also had to manage South Africa during the COVID-19 global pandemic. And he's done well on every single front. So I think this is why he remains the only politician in the country who enjoys, in opinion polls, the trust and the confidence.
I mean, you've said quite a number of really, what I call it, amazing achievements of the ANC and even the president. But I really would like to ask you, on a scale of 10, 10 being the highest, how would you rate the ANC's administration in recent times? I'm talking of in the past 4 years.
In the past 4 years, that's a very easy one. Easily would give it a 7 out of 10. There's been huge
Sorry,
strides
you said you would rate it what?
Easily 7 out of 10. Easily.
7 out of 10, in spite of the controversies.
No, so let's look at the facts. When Cyril Ramaphosa inherited government, it was deeply corrupt. Compromised ministers in cabinet, compromised officials in the prosecuting authority, in the police, the intelligence services, the tax authority. He removed all of those compromised persons. The fact that we now have a former president who can be convicted by a court of law, sentenced to prison, that's an achievement. The fact that we can have a speaker of parliament being charged by the prosecuting authority for corruption, or a police commissioner going to prison, that shows you that we're tackling corruption. We've seen the South African Revenue Service, the tax authority, competent management being put in place, and tax compliance increasing significantly from 61 to over 64%. And that's bringing the revenues the state needs to fund public services to pay down the debt. When the president took over, we were having unprecedented levels of electricity blackouts, load shedding, what we call it here. We have not had electricity load shedding now for 2 months because there's been a systematic approach to rebuilding the electricity utility, which is now giving breathing space to the economy.
I'm sorry, you said you have not had electricity cut out in about 2 months because of the radical changes that have been happening. But again, you would also want to say that it's part of the gimmick of politicians to sort of make things magically work once it's about 6 months or a year to elections to win the votes of the people.
Let me assist you. Because I've actually been involved in these things. It might seem at a distance if one listens to opposition parties that it's just a magical gimmick. It's not. There's been a systematic efforts for the past 4 years, which COSATU has been involved in, to assist the electricity company to reduce its debt burden, to ramp up maintenance. You're not going to do that simply overnight. There's no way. South Africa is too much of a transparent, noisy democracy for politicians to pull a fast one over society. It's far too difficult. We can point to tangible facts. The fact is electricity has improved. We were having 12 hours of load shedding 2 years ago. We've not had it for the past 2 months. Unless you're saying that we can somehow miraculously put scotch tape on the power station, I'll be surprised about that one. We've seen where the ports were under severe congestion last year, significant improvements, which now benefits manufacturing, mining, and agricultural exports. And it's not an exaggeration when we see people going to prison for corruption, for tax evasion. Those are real achievements. And we look, I think, to be fair, the damage done during the decade capture will take about a decade to fix up. But I think what we're expecting, South Africans are not unrealistic or impatient, is to see progress, and we are seeing progress. So I look at what he did during COVID-19. South Africa had one of the biggest economic and social relief packages put for any African country, in fact, even in the world, where we released about 65 billion rand to help 5.7 million workers, about 40% of the workforce, to have money to take care of their family. We had one of the most successful vaccination rates and health and safety campaigns. So you look at our death rates, it is far less than if you compare it to Europe or to the United States. So on many fronts, we've done well. So I think we should be fair to the president. Not to say we mustn't criticize him, definitely there are mistakes, but on a scorecard and where we've come from, it's huge improvements.
All right, Matthew Perks, I'm going to ask you this very last question, and of course, I would appreciate it if you answer objectively. Now, this is an election. Anything can happen. What if the ANC doesn't come back to power? We know that COSATU is a strong alliance of the ANC. What becomes of COSATU?
No, life continues as is. We're a democracy. The ANC has lost elections in the Western Cape province many years ago in the city of Cape Town, which is the legislative capital. The ANC lost power in Johannesburg, Pretoria, Port Elizabeth, other municipalities, and that is fine. If the ANC loses power, it will simply accept that. It will go to the opposition benches. Not even a shred of doubt in that. Our electoral commission is one of the most respected internationally. Our elections are very transparent because at each station, all political parties are allowed to have voting agents to watch the entire process from the opening of the ballot boxes to voting to counting the voting, which is done at each voting station. So that's why we've always had free and fair elections. So there's never been any single doubt of it. And if, let's say, for example, as you're saying, if the ANC loses, what happens to COSATU? No, we continue as is. We're an independent federation of unions. We have unions who work in the private sector, in the clothing industry, in the mining industry, etc., where government doesn't really have much role. We will continue as is. The COSATU was formed long before the ANC had any chance of becoming a ruling party, and we would exist even when the day might come that the ANC might not be in power. So for us, it will be a setback, definitely. Workers would struggle. Right. Because many of the progressive labor laws we've put into place, like a minimum wage, basic conditions, might be under threat. But we'll continue.
All right, Matthew. Thank you so much for being with me on the program today. Matthew Parks, COSATU Acting National Spokesperson and Parliamentary Coordinator from South Africa. Once again, thank you for your time.
Thank you.